As a nation, we are facing a skills gap and a labor shortage, either one of which pose significant challenges. Combined, they present us with a workforce crisis. The webinar today, Identifying Job Opportunities and Career Pathways, Tools and Resources, in very concrete and practical terms, seeks to address this crisis. My name is Dan Costin, and I will be moderating the webinar today. All three presenters will be sharing tools and resources that are in the development phase, in the expansion phase, or are already available that help address this workforce crisis for both employees and employers. Our first presenter today is Hillary Gardner. She is a project consultant for World Education Services Global Talent Bridge, where she assists with special projects such as Skilled Immigrant Integration Program and the Career Pathways e-guides. WEST Global Talent Bridge is dedicating to helping skilled immigrants fully utilize their talents and education in Canada and in the United States. World Education Services Global Talent Bridge joins with institutional partners, community-based organizations, and policymakers to help skilled immigrants use their skills, leverage their training, and achieve their academic and professional goals. Our second presenter is ZUZANA CEPLA. She is the Policy and Advocacy Associate at National Immigration Forum. Founded in 1982, the National Immigration Forum advocates for the value of immigrants and immigration to our nation. For more than 35 years, the Forum has worked to advance sound federal immigration solutions through its policy expertise, communications outreach, and coalition building, which forges powerful alliances of diverse constituencies across the country to build consensus on the important role of immigrants in America. Our third presenter is Joshua Westfall. He is the Senior Manager of Policy and Programs at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation is dedicated to strengthening America's long-term competitiveness. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation educates the public on conditions necessary for business and communities to thrive, on how businesses positively impact communities, and on emerging issues and creative solutions that will shape the future. Before we begin today, and given the large number of participants, we will not be taking any verbal questions. However, if you have a question during the presentation, please feel free at any time to post it in the question box found on the webinar page. Please do not enter questions in the chat box, as we will not be reviewing the chat box for questions. All questions need to be entered in the question box, and after all three presenters have finished, we will begin answering the questions that have been posted. We are going to start today with Hillary Gardner from World Education Services Global Talent Bridge. Please go ahead, Hillary.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan, for that introduction and for having me today. And please just do let me know if you have any trouble with the sound or audio quality on my end. I'm very happy to be here today to share with you some of the resources that World Education Services Global Talent Bridge has prepared and is preparing specifically to support internationally trained immigrants. So I'm going to be giving a selection of some of the resources that we have available for free online. On the next slide, as Dan mentioned, it's just a brief introduction to our organization. WEST was founded in 1974, and it is a nonprofit that is dedicated to helping international students and professionals achieve their educational and professional goals in the US and Canada. We have offices in New York and Toronto. And West Global Talent Bridge was established in 2011, as Dan said, with a mission aimed at helping internationally educated immigrants and refugees to more fully utilize their talents. And all of the resources I'm going to share today are available for free on our website. And the next slide is an introduction to those resources. Some of our newest resources are career pathways guides. And these guides are a series of free publications. They're available currently as PDFs, and they provide resources and guidance to internationally trained immigrants seeking to use their degree from abroad in the US. We actually do have a Canadian series of career pathways guides, but obviously for today we assume most of our audience is interested in the US materials. And this screenshot sort of shows you how to access the guides online. If you can see the drop-down menu there that says e-guides, and then also the link to our website, and that will help you access those materials online. Our next slide is an introduction to really the reason why we created the guides, and that is due to this phenomenon that we call brain waste. As you know, many immigrants possess in-demand skills and experience in a variety of occupations, but are often unable to access jobs that match their skills or knowledge or experience. As you can see in the current graphic, it's estimated that around 2 million skilled immigrants are either unemployed or underemployed. And this phenomenon is commonly referred to as brain waste. And we'll look at some of the factors behind brain waste on the next slide. And brain waste is really one of the reasons that WES, World Education Services, wanted to create the Career Pathways Guides to serve as a reference resource for skilled immigrants and those who work with skilled immigrants to help alleviate this issue. The next slide is just a brief overview of those factors driving brain waste or underemployment. Oftentimes, some of the barriers we see that are experienced is a lack of foreign credential recognition or difficulties with foreign credential recognition, a lack of U.S. education or work experience, social capital, understanding networking, interviewing processes, resume formats. Those are issues that we refer to as social capital. And then, of course, struggling with English proficiency or professional English proficiency. So our career pathways guides are written to address some of these issues or a lack of access to information on some of these issues. And in the following slides, what I'm going to do is kind of give you a quick overview of what you can find in these resources online and in these guides. Some of the topics that are covered, as you can see, we currently have guides out in the fields of nursing, education, and engineering. And so in each guide for each professional field, the reader is going to get some information on gaining recognition for their foreign education, academic requirements to work in the field, as well as licensing and certification requirements. And we pay special attention to introducing and explaining the issue of transferable skills, because we recognize that for many of our readers, potential readers, the idea of changing careers is sometimes new or difficult. And so we talk about how transferable skills can help them to find a related or alternative career, either instead of licensing and returning to their original career, or while they are waiting to go through the licensing process. And you'll also see that each guide includes several different kinds of tools and resources, only some of which I'm going to show you today. So I really hope that you will go online and take a look at our free resources after today's webinar. So let's take a look in a little more detail, kind of how the Pathways guides work. The next slide shows the overall design of the Pathways guides, and the strategy around which the guides were planned and designed. So they begin by suggesting an action, in this case, how to set realistic goals, and then how to come up with the steps and timeframes for completion. In this instance, you're seeing an example from early on in the guide where the steps are outlined related to the general goal of improving English language skills. As I mentioned, sometimes one of the barriers to returning to a professional career is a lack of English proficiency. And then finally, you'll see that the guide points to a tool or a resource in the guide to help with overcoming this barrier. In this case, we have a great SMART goal worksheet at the end of the guide, which is a useful template for anyone to use to plan their next steps. So on the next slide, you'll see an example of what we call a case study, or I sometimes refer to as a success story for Sering. And Sering was an ethnic Tibetan who immigrated to the US from India in 2009, where she was working as a nurse. So we're going to look a little bit at examples of how Pathways can help someone like Sering move forward because she wants to return to working as a nurse in the US. And you'll see that the guides do include stories. We try to include a story of someone who's returned to their original profession, and then someone who, as I mentioned, might have made a career move into a related or alternative career. So let's take a look on the next slide at how Pathways might help someone like Sering return to the nursing career, for example. And one of the ways it does that is it will help immigrant professionals understand their career options. In this case, it provides a good introduction to the difference between regulated and non-regulated professions. And you can see, I know the screenshots are kind of small, but you can see that, for example, it helps Sering answer the question, can I work as a nurse in the United States without a US license? Again, step-by-step guidance and guidelines for choosing a career pathway and potential barriers along the way. Because we know that in the US, for example, nurses do need a license. So let's continue moving forward. On the next slide, I want to make sure to get through the content. And Pathways guides also help immigrant professionals understand career options. So you'll see on this slide a small screenshot called Working as a Nurse in the US. And that is an example of how the guides elaborate on how the professional field is understood in the US. In nursing, for example, oftentimes abroad, the scope of nursing and the kinds of duties are very different to what nurses do, to very specific assigned roles that nurses play in the US. And for example, in the US, oftentimes nurses can work in a multitude of settings such as hospitals, clinics, nursing homes, government agencies, or public schools, and that might be different from the individual's home country. So what we do in the Pathways guides is really try to outline this kind of information about the professional field up front to give clients clear expectations for what the field is like in the US. Also on the next slide, you'll see examples of how the Pathways guides help immigrants understand how to move forward with their degrees. Different kinds of post-secondary degrees are listed in ascending order. Oftentimes, the idea of an associate degree or different kinds of degrees are new for foreign trained professionals. And you'll see that we have links to further information under each degree heading, example careers at each level of education, any licensing or certification requirements for those kinds of careers. And then you'll see that Go Further icon, which provides helpful steps or suggestions for moving forward. So this is really a good example of how the Pathways guides try to help the reader understand, both short-term and long-term career planning in the U.S. Moving forward again, as we talked about, Pathways will provide guidelines for credential recognition and in particular field-specific advice. In the case of nurses, for example, we want to make sure that someone like Sering connects with the Commission on Graduates of Foreign Nursing Schools, CGFNS. So while we sometimes can't go into detail about all the state specifics, we definitely try to give a good overview of field-specific advice on which avenues to pursue in credential evaluation. I'm going to keep moving forward. There's a lot in each of the guides, as you can see. The next slide is an overview of the licensing and certification processes. So definitely basic steps to licensing or certification for regulated professions. And here you'll see a good example of our helpful tips and call-out boxes that help highlight important information for the reader. Again, for example, in the case of nurses, one of the things you first learn about is the NCLEX, the examination that nurses are required to pass. And so that information is highlighted here. The next slide is an example of some of the resources we provide, again, to help understand licensing processes. One of the challenges we have in the U.S. is there's not necessarily a national board for all 50 states. But we do provide resources so that someone like Sering can understand more about the Nurse Licensure Compact and can understand, if I get licensed in my current state, can I work in another state? Again, providing a general overview to the field and also some long-term planning if, for example, she's thinking of moving to another state or seeking employment in another state. So that is what I have as a selection from what's in the guide. Some of what I don't have screenshots of, as I mentioned, are the tools and resources like the SMART Goal worksheet, the case studies, and the long list of educational, career and employment, licensing, and financial resources that we provide at the end of each guide. So there are a lot of useful hyperlinks in each guide to get folks to the information that they need to move forward in their career planning. Before I end, I just wanted to share a couple of other useful resources that could serve as tools for immigrant professionals that are available also, again, for free on our website. On this screen, you'll notice the degree equivalency calculator, and this online tool lets people with degrees from abroad instantly see how their foreign credentials might compare to a US standard. So this is a tool available for informational purposes only. It's not meant to replace any kind of official credential evaluation, but it's a great tool for introducing the idea of degree equivalency and beginning to see potential next steps. And additionally, we have our WES Advisor blog, which is a great source of advice on education, employment, licensing, and national resources. So be sure, if anything I've said has interested interested you, be sure to subscribe to our newsletters, and you'll be able to keep in touch about upcoming resources. The last two slides I have to share and are related to our Imprint program, which is a national coalition focused on immigrant professional integration. Imprint hosts two maps that were created to help practitioners, policymakers, and advocates understand programs and services across the country. So you can see on this slide, in blue, the program map, and in red and green, the policy map, which includes pending and enacted legislation related to licensing and policies that impact career opportunity for internationally educated immigrants. The next slide, and I'm coming to an end, is just the Imprint program map in more detail. And this map showcases nearly 100 programs and services across the U.S. designed to help immigrant and refugee professionals achieve success. So these might be programs and services focused on career preparation, ESL for high-skilled immigrants, licensing and credentialing guidance, and feature service providers, advocacy and public education institutions, technical assistance, and resource providers. So if you're interested in learning what programs and services might be near you or different kinds of programs and services, the Imprint map is a great place to go. So that is what I have to share today, and hopefully I haven't run too much over my time. And this is our contact information, how to subscribe to our newsletter or follow us on Twitter. And with that, I would like to hand the webinar back over to Dan, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Hillary. And just as a reminder, we will be taking questions at the very end of all three presentations. If you have questions, please enter them into the question box on the right of your screen in the webinar area. One other reminder for those of you who may be taking notes is that we will be making available all three presentations today. So please do not feel that you have to try and keep up in taking notes on them. All of the presentations and all the slides will be made available to the participants on the call. Let me turn to our next presenter, ZUZANA from the National Immigration Forum. Please go ahead, ZUZANA.
Thank you, Dan, and hello, everyone. My name is ZUZANA CEPLA, and I'm a Policy and Advocacy Associate at the National Immigration Forum. Dan has already introduced our organization at the beginning, but I would like to kind of expand on what he said and add that one of our primary goals is to ensure that immigrants, together with other American workers, have skills to thrive and reach their full potential and thus advance our economy as a whole. And today I'm here to introduce our new tool, the Map to Success, that we believe will help to achieve this ambitious goal. But first, let me start with some background information and figures that actually led us to this idea. As you may be aware, and Dan mentioned it in his introductory remarks, our businesses currently face large job shortages. Data shows that by 2020, the U.S. will be short of about 7.5 million private sector jobs across all skill levels. At the same time, there are many immigrants who could help businesses to fill these gaps if they knew where the shortages are and had the right skill set to get them. So with these facts in mind, we created our Map to Success. It is an interactive tool that we believe is unique and has potential to be highly effective. Our Map to Success provides state-specific information in 3 areas: general facts about immigration, top 10 job shortages in each U.S. state, and information about licensing requirements for some of these jobs that are in high demand by U.S. businesses. And I will get into details in a little bit. But before I do, let me say in advance that the Map to Success is the forum's completely new project that was launched at the end of last month. And it is an ongoing project, which means that we are still adding states and are working on new report cards as we speak, actually. Currently, the map covers 25 states with largest immigrant populations. And the third set of information about licensing covers the highest ranking job out of the state's top 10 job shortages, which we identified as having a career advancement potential if the individual receives license or a certification. Now, trust me, it is not as complicated as it sounds. So with that said, let's take a look at how it all works. To access the map, you need to go to our website, www.immigrationforum.org, and search for Map to Success. The website will show you a map of the United States. States that we have covered, meaning we have a report card for them, are highlighted in light blue. And when you hover over them, the map will give you a brief 3-bullet point summary of immigration facts for each of the states. As you can see, for my example, I take the New York State. When I click on New York, the map will take me to the New York's report card, where I have 3 options to choose from based on the 3 information areas I mentioned before. So let's start with the first one. The first tab, as we call it, provides the users with general information about immigrants and immigration in the selected state. In this case, it's New York. The second tab provides users with information about top 10 job shortages in the state. Again, in this case, it's New York. And as you can see, we also provide info about wages, typical entry education levels, and others. And the job that is highlighted in yellow, as you can see, is the job we focus on at this moment in our third tab. The third tab actually has 2 parts. The first part, which you see on this slide, provides information about the job for which there is a shortage, the one that was highlighted in the previous tab, and if there are requirements for this job, what they are. And that is where we sometimes run into complications, because as you can see on this New York example, certification for personal care aid in New York is not required unless it is an organization funded under Medicaid. And since many employers in New York are under Medicaid, we still provide info about how to receive this license for this initial occupation with which the applicant would start, although it is not always necessarily required. As we work on this tool, we have to overcome many obstacles like this. So you will see quite a bit of exceptions in many of our report cards. That just highlights how complicated the licensing system is, and even more so for immigrants who may face other barriers such as language and so on. The second portion of the third tab shows what the applicant could become if he or she received another license or certification, in this case, home health aid. And what are the requirements for this next step? We also try to pay attention to requirements that may be specific to immigrants. In this case, you can see that some programs in New York offer training and evaluation in some foreign languages. So you can click and read more about that. We believe our Map to Success is a valuable tool, primarily for immigrants as well as other U.S. workers looking for a career pathway, but also staffers and researchers who are interested in facts and data about immigration and licensing. And we believe the tool could help our businesses that are looking for workers and thus advance our economy as a whole. So again, our Map to Success is an interactive, effective, and unique tool that may help various groups of individuals as well as businesses, which would ultimately help enhance our economy overall. So this is it from me for now. I'm happy to answer any questions during our Q&A session, but please feel free to reach out to me at my email address zpla@immigrationforum.org with any questions or tips, because as I said, this is an ongoing project and we are definitely looking for ways to improve the map and make it better. So with that said, thank you very much. And now back to Dan.
Thank you, ZUZANA. And on to our last presenter today, who is Joshua Westfall from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. Please go ahead, Joshua.
Thank you, Dan, and to all the presenters before me. It's a pleasure to be on this webinar. I really appreciate the opportunity to highlight some of our programs and initiatives with everyone that's on. So as Dan was saying, I'm presenting on behalf of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. That is the nonprofit affiliate of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And in our foundation, there are 3 centers. There's the Center for Corporate Citizenship, there is Hiring Our Heroes, and I work at the Center for Education and Workforce. So if we can go to the next slide. So as Dan noticed before, for the Center for Education and Workforce, we're focused on strengthening America's long-term competitiveness and workforce. And what we've noticed over time is that the #1 issue that employers are facing is finding qualified talent to fill their open positions. About 67% of employers cannot fill their open positions due to not finding qualified talent. This is a challenge and a concern that affects our employers, but it also affects our learners and workers, and it affects our education pathways and workforce pathways. So as you see on your screen, there's the stakeholder challenges. The #1 way that a business in America will compete is competing on talent. That is what will keep us competitive, both citywide, region, state, and even internationally, is to compete on talent. So employers are searching for that qualified talent and better aligning those systems. Learners want to make sure that they're able to connect their education and credentialing skill sets and requirements, and making sure that what they're learning is actually applied to what the workforce is asking for. And finally, the education workforce programs and partnerships, creating a streamlined pathway that better aligns what is being taught in classrooms and training facilities to the actual work of the day-to-day, so that we can make sure that we're being more time efficient and cost efficient and making sure everyone has high-paying, well-established jobs. If we can go to the next slide. So at the Center for Education and Workforce, we want to kind of redesign how we're looking at workforce development. We want an end-to-end process that's demand-driven and employer-led. We really want to move forward in the economy and the marketplace we have today, which, if you look on your screen on the old playbook, it's a different era in economy. Things were slow, based on paper copies, larger conferences and advisory committee meetings, and this idea that employers, aren't engaged enough or don't want to be engaged. And really, we want to turn that on its head. We want a new playbook that meets our demands of today, authentically employer-led, dynamic for the labor markets and increasingly changing, and the ability to change on a dime, and to compete on talent, making sure we're having the best qualified individuals for the job and getting them there as soon as we can. So this new playbook will consist of 2 initiatives that I'll discuss about today. One is the Job Data Exchange, which I'll talk about first, and then I will talk about the T3 Innovation Network. So for the next slide, for the Job Data Exchange. So this Job Data Exchange is really a set of open tools and resources to help employers and their HR providers better signal in-demand jobs and skills to education and training providers. It's really improving job descriptions and the transparency that goes out there of what is needed in today's workforce with those who are providing the information and teachings to have qualified workers and students and learners. So the JDX is hoping to send those clearer, faster, stronger signals. If I can go to the next slide. And so before I jump into exactly what JDX is, I do want to mention that this work has really built off of our foundational and signature program called the Talent Pipeline Management. And TPM is something that we started with a white paper back in 2014. As you see on your slides, we've grown to 26 states, over 200 partners, and over 2,000 employers are working on this end-to-end process that's demand-driven and employer-led, that improves education and workforce partnerships by better organizing the data and making sure that we share that and build these pathways together with employers and education and training providers. And it utilizes the supply chain management principles that businesses know really well to create better talent supply chains. And we do that over the 6 strategies that you see on your screen. So moving forward with JDX, the portion that you see on strategy 3, if we can go back 1 slide. If you look at strategy 3, this is where we build up this program of the Job Data Exchange from TPM, is how we're asking employers to better communicate their competency and credentialing requirements. Before 2018, this was still being done with our web tools and with work in collaboratives and one-on-ones. And what we're doing with the Job Data Exchanges with TPM, we were changing hearts and minds. With the job data exchange, we're trying to actually take that to scale and to build these pathways. So if we go to the next slide. So the job data exchange itself, it's what we're hoping to do is send better, faster, and clearer signals for those in-demand jobs and skills to our education and training providers. Most people will ask, well, how are you going to be able to do that? How do you build that to scale and link all of these employers with all of the education and training providers out there? Well, there's a on the web thing, which is the number 2 portion, there's a thing called the job posting schema. And what we're trying to do is improve job postings, both the descriptions and the postings, to be better structured and open data that is linked data. So the ability that it changes in real time and changes across all the different networks, and the ability to then link and understand keywords that are machine readable and actionable. And so I'll jump into that in a second, but so that's how we plan to do this. The actual tools that will be provided in this job data exchange is the ability to analyze job descriptions and make sure that there's an analysis of what's most important and least important. There's the job descriptions themselves and improving those abilities and being able to see across industry what is being able to compare and contrast those job descriptions on needs and actually base it off the market. And the last one is to actually send better job postings that are more transparent and linked to the actual job across and with comparisons to within the industry and across industries, so that we're sending those signals to our future students and learners and workers, as well as the education and training providers, on what the real needs are in real time. And so this project itself, again, at this point, I'm talking a lot in the future. We are in the piloting stage of doing this. So over throughout 2018 and in 2019, we are creating these tools and pilot testing them for the future. So if we go to the next slide. And so the way that one of the areas that we're actually pilot testing is the job posting schema itself. And that's when I was talking about before, the structured data. If you look on the left side of your screen, data itself, without context and without elements in it of splitting up what it means, it's hard to tell what the meaning of something is. So, for instance, if I say the word position, that could be the longitude and latitude position of where you are. That could be a position on a football or baseball field, or you could be talking about a position in a job description. All of those, the word is the same, but there's no context around it. But if you structure your data, if you put it into elements that are able to, and schemas that are able to read off each other and be machine readable and actionable, and you structure it in that way, then you understand exactly where it's coming from and how it's linked to something else. So one way we're doing that is expanding the job posting schema to be better structured data, specifically on competencies. What do they mean? What do we mean by skill sets? All of those areas, really defining those better. And to the right of your page, you'll see linked data. And that's how we cut down our lag time from years and months to in real time. And that's really where we're moving. There's been a tech revolution in all parts of our lives, from travel to education to financial banks and investments, but we have not done it for workforce. And really now is the time to do that. So by linking our data, we move away from things like PDFs and we move forward to when you change or update your education and career pathways, they change all across the network because they're linked in real time. Instead of following the chain for everyone you talked to in the past. If we can go to the next slide. So how does the JDX actually work? This slide is very simplistic, and I'll move to the next one in a second. But as you can see, we're going to have users that we're talking about that use the JDX and the data that goes into the JDX to make it work. The JDX itself, the tools and resources, are that purple box that get into some complex issues of algorithms and infrastructure. And then we want to send out that stronger signal to our recipients. So then the next slide. This is a more complex image, but as you see, the user in our pilot, we're working directly with employers and their HR vendors to use the JDX tools and resources to improve their job descriptions, to improve their job postings, and send that clearer signal. We're working with data partners to put in information into the tools and resources to find the market need. That's the government itself and using things like ONET. That's professional associations. That's competency frameworks. And that's actual job descriptions and postings and validations that we're putting in to these tools to actually find the market need and come out with the best opportunities. Then using the JDX tool, as you see at the top, you're able to analyze, you're able to improve your description, and you're able to distribute your position through a posting. And for the signaling of recipients, for the pilot test, we are only looking to signal directly to our talent sourcing providers. So that is education communities, staffing organizations, and training organizations, but directly to where you seek your talent. But in the future, we like this to actually be a resource to students and job seekers and other individuals as a direct service. But for the pilot, we just want to make sure that we send a clearer, stronger, faster signal from what employers need to then what education training providers need to know about the future of the workforce. If I can go to the next slide. So the pilot itself that I've been talking about, throughout 2019 is the pilot. We're currently in the co-design phase and from now and through March. In April, we'll be pilot testing the JDX tools and resources, and then we'll have an independent evaluation and to see if this was a successful pilot, and with the hopes of taking it to scale in 2020. So at the top of your screen, this whole pilot itself, there's the data work group. That's really the job posting schema we were talking about. How do we expand this on the web? How do we build elements into what we're posting that will actually be machine readable and actionable and get employers to fill it out that way to structure our data? If you look to the right of your screen, there's the pilot sites. We have 7 pilot sites, and the states are listed, and we're working with over a dozen employers that are actually co-designing these tools and resources and pilot testing the prototype come this spring. And then the last one on your left is the advisory committee. We are working across the board with different stakeholders to help us advise on which industry areas and which the types of tools and resources and who we need to reach out to get the JDX in the right hands and for the right pilot testing and make sure we're not missing anything, as well as hopefully the future implementation of the JDX into employer systems. If we can go to the next slide. So I'll move through these quickly, but one thing we've noticed is that with the hiring process, we were under the assumption that employers are looking at and analyzing their jobs, then they are building descriptions internally about what are the skills and competencies and needs and all of that information, and then they're distributing similar information out to the public. But if you next slide. But what we've actually been finding out is that really most employers are actually doing job descriptions first, which is an internal document. They are sometimes analyzing the needs of where the marketplace is or where their industry or where their actual business needs certain skill sets. And then they're distributing only portions of the job descriptions and only subparts of the elements of the hiring needs and skills out to the main public. So it's been a very kind of fragmented process. So if you move forward one slide. So our hope with the JDX is that we start to actually analyze what is required and what is preferred and what are jobs actually asking for in real time based on the market. And then let's build job descriptions based on that need. And let's also make sure that our job descriptions are looking more like our postings, or actually our postings are looking more like our job descriptions. We're providing clearer, better information to the public on actual need. And this then will hopefully improve the education and workforce partnerships and the flow of your career pathway. Next slide. This is a quick timeline that I've already kind of talked about, if we can go to the next slide. So that was the job data exchange, and I'm happy again to answer questions later in the question portion of it. The next initiative that we've been working on is called the T3 Innovation Network, and this is an open public-private data and technology infrastructure for the future. We are looking at all these emerging technologies around us: blockchain, the semantic web, Web 3.0 technologies, linked data, all of these things we discuss, yet much of the work in the education and workforce space are happening in silos, and they're not actually emerging these technologies and using the resources out there. They're all just working separately. So the T3 Innovation Network brings together all of the stakeholders from employers and businesses, chambers, education and training providers, colleges, and staffing associations, as well as human resource information, vendors, and data experts, all together at the table to talk about what do we want the future of our workforce to look like, and how can we make sure that we make that equitable across the marketplace. So if you can go to the next slide. So as I was talking about fragmentation, this is a quick example of where we are today. Everyone thinks that they own their own data, but it's actually very siloed and fragmented on where information is found. And it's very costly and takes a lot of time to be able to actually own and get your information to move through pretty much life, to move through your education and workforce pathway. As you can see in high school, the school district owns your information. And in order to get into the university, that has to be traded hands based on their time, and sometimes money is involved. When you go into your first job, you have to look back and get information from the universities and your primary schools. And then if you use government programs, you have to go through the whole process again, as well as your second and third job. So again, all of this is working separately and not necessarily together in a concise way, which is what we're hoping to do with the T3 network. If you can move to the next slide. So what we want to do is with these, now the T3 network, after the last 8 months, we're at over 185 organizations, almost 400 participants, working together to see if employers can signal the skills they need, if learners to signal what they can do, and educators to signal what people are being trained and educated to do, to better align and converge our systems with the modern technology that you see on your right-hand side to make a better public-private data infrastructure. Next slide. So how do you get 185 organizations to agree? We have guiding principles. These are also on our website, so I will actually move to the next slide. Over our first 6-month sprint from March to October, we held 4 work groups. We provided four work group reports that are on our website, and then we created one final overview report that explains the different work groups, as well as 10 pilot projects for the future. Next slide. And so now we're into phase 2 for the next 2 years, from January until December of 2020. And this is the pilot projects on your right hand of your screen kind of building up. You can find more information about this on our website. But this is an open network. We're always looking to have a larger, more diverse group of experts on these webinars and these meetings. If any one of these areas interest you, you have my contact information at the bottom, as well as we do have a phase 2 introductory webinar on February 26th. If that is of interest, please contact me as well, as we would like to, again, grow this group and make sure that we're better aligning these systems and that all stakeholders have a say in the future of our education and workforce pathways. Next slide. There is my contact information, and I think I have provided all the information I can in enough time so we can still answer some questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Joshua. Very much appreciated. And fully recognizing that you've been provided with a lot of great tools and resources, just a reminder that we will be circulating the PowerPoint presentations that were given by all 3 presenters today. And we will be providing an audio recording of this webinar for those who would be interested in it, and for those perhaps who had any difficulty with the audio, they'd be able to hear it again using the recording that we have made of this particular webinar. I'm going to turn to some of the questions right now. If others have questions, I'd ask that you please enter your questions in the question box, but I'm going to go ahead and get started with the questions we already have. And let me begin with you, Hillary. Here's the first question. Are any of the career pathway guides or the degree equivalency calculator translated into other languages? In other words, other language other than English?
Well, that's a great question. As I mentioned, we currently have the 3 guides available, nursing, education, and engineering. And our upcoming topics are accounting, IT, pharmacy, dentistry, allied health, and law. So those will be forthcoming this year. Right now that I know of, none of them are translated. As I mentioned, we have guides that are also available for Canada because, as you know, there are substantial differences in the Canadian and U.S. systems. So right now, everything is in English, available online. I would say I am a former ESL teacher. I worked many years at the Center for Immigrant Education and Training at LaGuardia Community College, and these guides are a great resource for the classroom, for if you're looking for reading and language learning opportunities. They include glossaries and of common terms, such as networking that I talked about. So right now, I don't know if translations, but that's a little bit more information about what's available in some of the guides.
All right, thank you very much, Hillary. And Joshua, this question is for you, and it's in regards to the T3 Innovation Network. And the question is, will the T3 Innovation Network help in addressing the skills gap and in training individuals to fill the current workers shortage? And if so, how will this particular instrument or tool, the T3 Innovation Network, assist in that regards?
That's a great question. So the T3 Innovation Network is allowing for, right now, our current talent marketplace, we don't have the qualified skills. We don't have qualified workers for the skills of today in the changing marketplace. One part of that is the communication and being able to exchange data between the employer and business side with the supply side on both ends. The other option too is that individuals, workers and learners might not know the opportunities that are available to them. So the T3 network, by converging modern technologies and Web 3.0 technologies, it will improve things like search and discovery, both for applicants, but also for employment opportunities. And it will better align some of the education and career pathways, both from what is being taught in the classroom and in training providers, and what employers are asking for. So by being able to combine those efforts, we'll have a more transparent and clear image of where the needs are and where the talent is.
Thank you, Joshua. Excellent. And this question is for ZUZANA in regards to the map to success. The question is, when do you anticipate all 50 states will be completed? And do you have plans in terms of expanding the information made available in the map?
Yes, thank you, Dan. That's a great question. So, of course, we are striving to finish all 50 states as soon as possible. Realistically, we believe they will be all done no later than in September. We are hoping for this summer. When it comes to the other information that are provided on our map to success, especially the licensing portion, which is the third tab, after we finish all 50 states with the first job, we are planning on expanding that portion to more than one. So basically, those jobs that you see on the second tab that for which there is a career advancement potential, all of these will be covered. So after we finish all 50 states with one job, we will start adding jobs for each of the states, basically.
All right, thank you very much. And then back to you, Hillary, and this is in regards to the imprint program map. In reviewing that map, if an organization has programs for immigrants in their state that programs that are not currently captured by the map, is it possible to have those programs added to the imprint program map? And if so, how would they do that?
Yes, definitely. We would love to make sure that the imprint program map features everything it needs to feature. And so they, if someone has a program like that, just be sure to get in touch with me or with West GTB using the contact information on our contact slide. And we will look at adding that program. I just wanted, just as a reminder, a map, the imprint map showcases programs and services that are designed for internationally trained immigrants and refugees. And in order to qualify for the map, programs and services need to have dedicated resources or staff that address barriers faced by immigrants and refugees who have obtained their educational degrees and credentials abroad. But in the spirit of collaboration, yes, we definitely want to feature any programs that should be on the map and that are not there yet. So please be in touch using the contact information on the slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. And at this point, I'm going to extend our thanks to all three presenters for your excellent presentations. And I'm going to just remind all the participants that you will be getting a follow-up email from us, which will contain the presentations and also an audio of the webinar. Oh, yes, it would actually be a video containing the presentation today. All right. Thank you all very much for participating. We are going to close the webinar at this point, and we very much appreciate your participation. We wish you all a great day. Thank you.
Thank you so much for organizing.